This day in sports history.
Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
Hey, it's so great to see you back for today's edition of This Day in Sports History. If you have a moment after today's episode, consider leaving a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts or a 5-star rating on Spotify. Thanks if you can. No worries if you don't have time. This dish is a member of the Sports History Network, your source for sports history and many different sports and eras. You can find more info at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's August 27th, and on this day in 1972, an injury in a preseason game changed the arc of one man's likely Hall of Fame career, leading to a rule change that probably saved many from the same fate. NFL preseason games were a little bit different back in the 1970s than they are today. Back then, a lot of guys had jobs in the offseason. Training camp and the preseason games were a way to play themselves back into shape and get ready for the regular season. The games still didn't matter in the standings, but for veterans and rookies alike, it was important to get quality playing time in. On this day in 1972, the Baltimore Colts were playing a preseason game against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Tampa. The game was in the fourth quarter, and as an example of how things were different back then, Terry Bradshaw was still in as the quarterback. Colts defensive end Bubba Smith was getting ready for his 6th season in the league and coming off of back-to-back Pro Bowl seasons, and he'd been a first-team All-Pro in '71. He had started this game and played well before yielding to some of the younger guys. Well, he stepped back in for this series to get a little bit more work in, hoping to get to midseason form as quickly as he could. As a defensive end, his role was as a run stopper and a pass rusher. Bradshaw dropped back to pass. Smith maneuvered around the offensive lineman tasked with blocking him, and he forced Bradshaw out of the pocket. The pressure that Smith applied caused Bradshaw to throw an errant pass that was intercepted by the Colts' Rick Fogg. Now, going the other way, Bubba became a blocker. Running towards the sideline, Smith ran into one of the first down stakes, got tangled up in the chain that linked the two posts, and he blew out his knee. At this point in time, the first down chains were anchored in the ground with spikes, so they weren't easily moved, even by a 6'8", 265-pound NFL All-Pro. After a 2-hour operation was performed on Bubba's right knee, it was determined that the damage was much more extensive than first thought, and he ended up missing the entire 1972 season. The NFL quickly realized that an equipment update was needed, and so they mandated that all first down markers and chains would have a rubber cap instead of a grounded spike. The rule was obviously too late to help out Bubba Smith, but it probably saved other players from similar fates. When Bubba came back in the '73 season, he was a different player. First of all, the Colts had released him, and he had signed with Oakland. He played 2 years with the Raiders and then 2 seasons with the Houston Oilers, but he never got back to the level of dominance that he had prior to his injury. Now, sacks did not become an official NFL stat until 1982, but Pro Football Reference has calculated player stats retroactively. In the 5 seasons before he was injured, it's been calculated that Smith had 43 sacks, with a high of 10.5 in 1968. In the 4 seasons after the injury, he had just a total of 9.5, was never voted as an All-Pro, and was not invited back to the Pro Bowl. Prior to the injury, Bubba Smith was on a Hall of Fame trajectory, but the injury snuffed that dream, leaving lots to wonder what if he hadn't gotten tangled up in the first down chains on this day in 1972. On this day in 1982, Rickey Henderson became the single-season base-stealing thief. Henderson's Oakland A's were on the road in Milwaukee. Henderson came into the game tied with Lou Brock for the season stolen base record of 118. He drew a walk in the third inning, and everybody on the field, in the seats, upstairs in the press box, and watching on television knew exactly what was going to happen next. But only starting pitcher Doc Medich and the bespectacled Brewers catcher Ted Simmons had the power to stop it, and yet they could not. Medich threw 4 straight times to first base in an attempt to keep Henderson close to the bag, and then the Brewers called a pitch out, but Henderson ran anyway. The throw from Simmons was good, but just not good enough. Henderson slid under the tag for stolen base number 119. He pulled the bag from the ground, and he held it high above his head as the Brewers fans cheered. The game was paused for several minutes as American League President Larry MacPhail, Lou Brock, and others congratulated Henderson for eclipsing the mark. Ricky wasn't done for the night, though. He stole 3 more bases to end the night with 122. He ended the season with 130 stolen bases, which is still the modern baseball single-season record. In 1977, it was a baseball oddity. In fact, it's so odd that this is the only time it ever happened in Major League Baseball history. The Texas Rangers were in New York taking on the Yankees. The Rangers had a 4-2 lead heading into the 7th inning. With 2 men on and 1 out, Toby Harrah sent a ball to deep right that Lou Piniella got a glove on at the top of the wall, but he couldn't hang on to it. Piniella injured himself on the play, and Harrah raced around the bases for an inside-the-park 3-run home run. The next man up was Bump Wills, and on the next pitch, Wills sent one to deep center. Mickey Rivers got a glove on this one, but he also couldn't come up with it. The ball rolled to the fence, and he got 0 help from Roy White on the play he was playing in left field at the time, and it took a New York minute for Rivers to find the ball, chase it down, throw it back to the infield. Wills, just like his dad Maury, was a speedster on the base path, and he also rounded the bags for an inside-the-park home run. It was the first and only time that back-to-back inside-the-park home runs have been hit in the major leagues. Let's stay in New York, but scoot ahead in time to 1985 and change sports, too. John McEnroe came into the 1985 U.S. Open as the defending champion. He'd made things look pretty easy back in 1984 after a straight-set defeat of Ivan Lendl in the finals. At this point, though, in '85, McEnroe was not really playing his best tennis. He'd been bounced in the quarterfinals at Wimbledon in straight sets a month before by Kevin Curran. On this day, it was a first-round match against Israel's Shlomo Glickstein, a player ranked 175th in the world. On the face of it, this should have been an hour-long straight-set walkover for McEnroe. Instead, it turned into a 4-hour, 5-set grueling nightmare for Johnny Mac. It didn't look like a nightmare for McEnroe in the first set, though. He cruised to a 6-1 first-set win. Maybe it was a loss of focus or overconfidence, but Glickstein came back in the second, and he won 7-6 after a tiebreak, and then he loaded on more misery with a dominating third-set win, 6-2. So at that point, news of a possible upset of the defending champ and top seed rippled through the Flushing Meadows complex, and people started to flock to the match. McEnroe got increasingly frustrated with the additional crowd noise. After a relatively easy 6-3 fourth-set win for McEnroe, they were tied at 2 sets apiece. In the fifth, McEnroe took control and was up a break at 3-1, but Glickstein came right back, holding serve and then breaking McEnroe to level it again, and they went to a 5th-set tiebreak. McEnroe again held the advantage at 6-3 in the tiebreak, but the gritty Glickstein won 3 straight points to tie it again. It went to 7-7 before McEnroe could win consecutive points to win 7-6 in the 5th. This match must have refocused the defending champ because after this one, he won in straight sets through the quarters before a 5th setter in the semis and an eventual loss in the finals in a rematch with Lendl. And it's time for today's fun fact that has zilch to do with sports. If you were standing on a pulsar, which is the fastest spinning object in the universe at 716 rotations per second, 1, you'd probably get a little bit dizzy. But 2, the stars would not appear as dots, but rather as lines across the sky. That's all I've got for you today. Have a great rest of your day, and I will see you back here tomorrow for another edition of This Day in Sports History. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even write an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.